Hello everyone and welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to embark on an absolutely epic journey, looking at the very foundation of how humanity categorizes and understands the natural world. We'll be tracing a path that actually starts with primitive human fear and ends with this incredibly profound realization of our deep, deep connection to all life on Earth. Let's dive right in. To kick things off, take a look at this incredible seahorse illustration. Look at the intricate details there, right? The unique shape, that specialized armor. This single fascinating creature is a perfect anchor for our exploration today because it represents what the source text rightly calls the amazing diversity of living organisms. When we look out at the living world, we aren't just seeing a few standard models off an assembly line. We are confronted with literally millions of vastly different, highly specialized forms of life, occupying every conceivable environment. It's a chaotic, beautiful, and honestly staggering array of diversity.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we really need to set a baseline. Biology is defined as the science of life forms and living processes. Now, notice that this definition is twofold. It's not just about cataloging the static shapes and physical forms of life, like the physical structure of that seahorse we just looked at. No, it is equally about the living processes, the dynamic, vital functions that actually sustain these organisms and allow them to thrive, grow, and reproduce. That dual focus, that's the engine driving all biological science.
Now, let's look at how this builds historically, because, well, our ancestors certainly didn't start out as biologists. Imagine being an early human for a second. As our source notes, early man could easily perceive the basic difference between inanimate matter, things like the howling wind, the crashing sea, the blazing fire, and living organisms like the animals they hunted or the plants they foraged. That distinction was pretty obvious. But what did they actually do with that observation? Interestingly enough, they ended up treating them much the same in their minds. They deified some of the animate matter, and they deified some of the animals and plants. They literally made them into gods.
So the crucial question is, why did they do this? Why did early humanity look at both a thunderstorm and a predator and elevate them both to supernatural status? Well, our text gives us the answer. It was driven by a profound sense of awe and fear. The common feature of all these forms, whether it was a raging inanimate fire or an animate powerful animal, was the incredibly strong emotion they evoked. Early humans were interacting with nature not through the lens of scientific inquiry or careful measurement, but through a highly mystical lens born out of sheer survival, wonder, and let's be honest, terror. And because of this emotionally charged, mystical relationship with nature, something truly fascinating happened in the timeline of human history. As the text points out, the actual objective description of living organisms began much, much later in human history. Just think about that for a second. We built complex societies, we developed languages, we created early technologies, all long before we started rigorously describing the biological world, which, interestingly enough, includes human beings ourselves. The scientific mirror took a remarkably long time to be turned toward life.
So what was the massive holdup? The primary roadblock was an anthropocentric view of biology. Anthropocentric simply means human-centered. Our source text explains that societies which indulged in this human-centered view of the world registered very, very limited progress in biological knowledge. I mean, it makes sense, right? If your culture genuinely believes that humanity sits entirely separate from nature, or that the entire universe revolves solely around human affairs, there really isn't much motivation to carefully study the anatomy of a fern or the life cycle of a beetle.
But eventually, things had to change. We reached a major turning point. The chaotic, overwhelming diversity of life finally forced humanity to change its approach. And it wasn't just out of pure scientific curiosity either. It was out of absolute necessity. As populations grew, as agriculture expanded, as early medicine developed, we needed to know exactly what we were dealing with. We couldn't just rely on local myths anymore. We needed a systematic and monumental description of life forms. We had to impose order on the chaos just to survive and thrive.
To pull off this monumental task, scientists had to invent entirely new frameworks from scratch. First up, identification, figuring out what specific characteristics define an organism. Second, nomenclature, creating a universal naming system. That way, a scientist in one country knows exactly what a scientist in another is talking about, no more confusing local nicknames. And third, classification, grouping these newly named organisms into logical, structured categories based on their features. It might sound like a boring administrative task, but these 3 steps sparked a literal scientific revolution.
Now here is where the story gets incredibly exciting. When scientists started doing all this tedious organizational work, identifying, naming, classifying, they stumbled onto what our text calls the biggest spin-off of such studies. See, they weren't just organizing separate, independent boxes of life. By systematizing everything, they had this massive aha moment. It was the recognition that living organisms actually share deep, fundamental similarities. Beneath all that surface-level diversity, there were profound, hidden connections linking different forms of life together.
And this connection actually works in two staggering dimensions. First, horizontally, meaning all present-day living organisms are related to each other right now. You share underlying biological similarities with the grass outside your window and the birds in the sky. But it also works vertically through time. We are related to all organisms that have ever lived on this earth. It is a continuous, unbroken thread of life stretching way, way back into deep history. Think about the philosophical impact of that realization. For centuries, that anthropocentric, human-centered view told us we were entirely separate from nature, above it, even. But the science of classification completely shattered that illusion. It was a revelation which truly humbled man. We suddenly understood that we aren't standing outside the circle of life looking in, we are woven directly into its fabric, sharing a common heritage with the entire living world.
And the best part? This scientific humbling didn't just stay locked away in academic textbooks, it leaked out into the real world and fundamentally changed human behavior. Recognizing our deep, shared biological history acted as a massive catalyst. This revelation directly led to cultural movements for the conservation of biodiversity. Once humanity realized that wiping out a species meant permanently severing a unique branch of our own shared family tree, conservation became a moral and cultural imperative, not just a niche scientific interest.
So, where exactly does this lead us? Well, here is a quick look at the upcoming chapters in this unit. We are going to start with the living world. Then we'll move into biological classification, and finally we'll tackle the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom directly from a taxonomist's perspective. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. How does knowing we are connected to every single organism that has ever lived change how you view biodiversity today? The next time you step outside, remember that you aren't just an observer of nature. You are family. I really hope this foundation helps you tackle the upcoming chapters with a much deeper appreciation for the magnificent, interconnected web of life. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and keep learning.